So this is just, we started out in 1870, so we got rid of the Civil War. With commercial paper, we'll be able to go back a little further. We have a similar table for commercial paper, but I just have to call one through here. So if you look, you can see September and October, 6.84% annualized is the volatility, but it's only 2.63 the rest of the year. And even if you take it, no, it's true. Some of that's due to the panic of 1873, which we took out. And you saw that thing. So the number goes down to 3.24%, which is still a lot higher than 2.36%. And if you look after, you can see that September and October are actually lower. So the Fed seems to be doing its job. The differential between, if you were to actually construct such a test, which everything has to be done numerically there, because that differences and differences on volatilities has a non-standard distribution. But if you did that, you could say, things were different before, they're not different anymore. Okay. That's really what we found. Okay, so it looks like the lender of last resort at least helped there. So that's the first thing. Now, what about stocks? Well, stocks we go back further, and we did go back further. Okay, not back to the War of 1812 when they burned Washington, but back to the Second Bank of the United States, which also, for those of you, this was for Tom Willett. I wanted to make sure that we also called it the War of Northern Aggression, just so that he wouldn't get upset. Okay. And, but he's not here, so I really didn't need to do that. Okay. So there's a couple reasons for doing this. One is, you could say, look, the decline of the agricultural sector is driving the results. Now, it was still pretty big in 1925, so we really don't think so. And if you look at the decline, you don't see a steady decrease in volatility due to that, if you look at the data. But nevertheless, it's sort of nice to know in the second bank period that actually things look better for volatility. So that's one reason to do stocks. Another reason is you think that maybe the shock's propagating. So that's the first thing we do, or the next thing we do, is we look at this period. And it turns out we use this Getzman, Ibbotson, and Tom data. Again, because the Coles data is bad. And we look at the per month volatility overall during the period. It's higher during the harvest season, statistically significantly so at the 1% level. But if you break it down by period, what happens? So volatility is really high. See, the national banking system doesn't look very helpful relative to the free banking period. That can be for lots of reasons, though. We just don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't statistically significantly different from each other, those two periods. Although the volatility seems to be a little higher. This is monthly volatility now. So if you look at monthly index volatility, today, if you want an idea of what index volatility is like, it's, I guess the VIX right now is at about 20%, which means today maybe it's about, about 5% for the index. It's been lower, for example, 4-point-something% for volatility for the index. During the post-Aldrich Vreeland period, you can see it's during the rest of the year, it's 4.78%. It's actually higher than in September and October. It's also higher during the rest of the year than in September, October, the second bank period. But when there's no lender of last resort, things go the other way. Okay. They're not, and in fact, there's more volatility in September and October than during the rest of the year. So it looks like the shock's propagating. So now I'm getting close to running out of time. So what else? Well, just a picture of that. It's not really as good as the interest rate picture, unfortunately. So then we said, look, we've got to do a little better than that. So the next thing we did is we said, all right, what about Granger causality? We actually did things both ways. First we said, we don't have, do interest rate increases Granger cause stock price declines? And the answer is, well, yeah, they did. It turns out that if you do this wall test statistic where you want to know whether the column rate Granger causes the stock price declines. In fact, it does at the 1% level all the time, except during the 1915 to 1925 period. And we really should do the 1908 to 1925 period. During that period, which is the Fed period, it's not statistically significant. During all these other periods, some of which are overlapping, you see, 1880 to 1925, we've gotten rid of the panic of 1873, for example. You can see that any one of those periods, it looks like you do have a significant relation and then after you don't. So that's good news for us. And it looks like, again, the central bank is doing its job to some extent. Okay, so you don't get the Granger causality. Now it also turns out, we look the other way. We have no hypothesis about this, but we thought we'd better at least check to see if the stock price increases. They seem to Granger cause interest rate increases as well, but they don't always do it. There are some periods for which it's not true. We have no hypothesis about that. So it looks like things don't go the other way as well, which is good for us because, I mean, maybe there's a reason why they should, but I don't know what it is. So that doesn't seem to work, which is also good for us. And the last thing is I just wanted to end by saying, well, what is a one standard deviation shock? We have this impulse response analysis. What does a one standard deviation shock do? And it reduces stock returns by 1.8% after 36 months, which is not that much. That's only a one standard deviation shock to the call loan rate, which is not that big a shock. So what we need to do is we need to look to see what the shock in an average financial crisis, about what the size of the shock is there. And then it may turn out that that number looks a lot better for us. I mean, a lot bigger, which is better for us. And so we need to actually look at impulse responses to large shocks as well as to small shocks. Partly because, of course, it's better for us, and partly because that's what Brunemeyer and Peterson actually say we ought to be doing in the first place. So we've not yet done. Other things we've not yet done, we haven't looked at the bid to see whether the bid-ask spreads have widened. We have the data on bid-ask spreads, although it only goes back to about 1880 or 1885. So we're not going to be able to go all the way back, but at least we have some sample here. And then it's too bad that we don't have the panic of 1873. And the last thing is that volume should fall because spreads rise, and we have data on volume as well. Right now we're in the process of collecting daily data, so we can at least look at what's going on in the panic of 1907, see if the effects are relatively larger then. And that's basically it. That's what we've done so far. That's where we're going. So we have some results that are suggestive, these results on volatility, and we have some results that are maybe more than suggestive, which says that we do have this Granger causality. So it appears that these shocks to interest rates really do affect asset prices. And the question is, do they also affect these other things that Brunemeyer and Peterson are talking about? Although those things to me seem like they're a little less important than the asset price decline. So that's all I have to say. I'm ready to take questions, or more questions.
What data is missing for 1815?
We don't have, there's no call loan, the call loan rate data is missing. And I don't think commercial paper goes back past about 1845. But maybe it's the shock to the short-term interest rates that we're suggesting matters, although for, yeah, I don't know what the frequency of banknote,
Yeah.
it's longer is the problem. I think that's why we didn't do it before.
The banknote data is monthly.
The banknote data is monthly, but what about, how long is a banknote for? I mean, the problem is we didn't look at long-term interest rates, so the question is how long-term. So that would be worth knowing, I think. Because if you look at long-term rate, you don't really see this effect with the long end of the term structure. If you look, what we checked for more modern, late 19th century data, you don't really see it there. So I'm not sure whether the banknote data would help us or not. But I don't really know that much about it, so that's a problem. Yeah.
My question is not about the technical you use. My question is something related to like history. You talk about history, something related to crisis, right?
Yeah.
And you don't mention something they call it, credit collapse of 1931, the one that occurred between Australian Bank and after the New York Stock Exchange collapse in 1989. You haven't mentioned that because that's one of the greatest credit collapse.
Well, that's right, because one of the issues about one of the issues associated with the 1929 is that if you look at after 1925, there's plenty of evidence that the Fed started to adopt tight money policies. So all of the things so it's very hard to say. Yes, there was a Fed in 1929, but no, the Fed didn't really lend the way it was supposed to. So if you look, for example, at agricultural seasonality in the late 1920s, it reappears. So this is noted by Myron in one of his papers. So what I guess I could say is that perhaps that crisis was made worse. I don't know if it was precipitated, but it was made worse because of the unwillingness of the Fed to have a liberal lending policy. And in fact, if you think about the policies that Bernanke pursues today as chairman of the Fed, one of the reasons that he does that is because he is a scholar who did a lot of his research on what the policies were adopted by the Fed were during the Great Depression. And I think, although I'm putting words in his mouth, that one of the reasons why you had such a liberal